Welcome back to The Big Issue, discussing matters of security, the police recruitment, perhaps potential police reform in training. After the press release from the police which was supposed to provide us an update on the police investigation into the bullion van robberies. Like I said, everybody's happy that progress has been made, but also bigger questions have arisen after 2 suspects who were policemen died during the operation, and 4 other policemen have been arrested. The matter, they're saying they're pursuing 5 other civilian suspects, means that there's still quite some way to go before this case comes to an end. I've been looking at this with the Member of Parliament for a while, West Peter Tobu, himself a retired police officer, Quitting security analyst, Franklin Kujo, president of Money Africa, Martin Kwebu, a private legal practitioner. And just to continue with some of the messages before Emmanuel comes back, this one says, this one's from Nene Inside Time. Says there's been a worrying trend of criminals being killed by police recently. He puts criminals in quotes. All we hear is that there was exchange of fire and the criminals were killed. We need answers to these killings too. Babamu from Tamale says, from Tamale Central, says, Godfred, the best way we can change the police in this country is to adopt innovative plans in the service. Indeed, both political parties, MPP and DC, are guilty of recruiting their members into the service. I agree with Honorable Tobu. Foster says, on this issue of bullion van robberies, I'm beginning to think, if possible, there's a need to call for a national cross-check of the police and who is qualified to wear the uniform, because I feel there are so many of them who are not proper and have the proper documentation to be there. And if anybody is found, person must be removed from the service. This one says, Joseph Adoboy from La says, the president refused to implement the Emil Short Commission report after the Ayawaso issue and went ahead to give them thumbs up by enlisting some of them in the various security services. That's an allegation that he is making. Godfred, I can say that the positive vetting is still in existence by the BNI. They will do their job and submit their reports, but the implementation of their findings relies on the police service to act. So Nana in the says the BNI is still doing the positive vetting, but for now,
it doesn't appear for all.
Well, he says when the report is submitted, work is not done on the reports.
Why do you commission to do it?
Because those days when it was being done, the post, I remember in the mid-2000s, 2003, 2004, thereabout, it used to be public. Even so, recruits could tell you that, hey, they visited my village. This. Now you don't hear it. So let's be careful. But Honorable is here. Right. He knows it better.
Well, the public knows it better. I mean,
Stephen from New Legon Hill says, Godfrey, if we pretend that people are not corrupt when we know they are, this is what will happen. So he has that. Citizen Kofi from Apollonia says, for me, the murder of these 2 suspects is an attempt to cover something bigger. The police service needs to come back and give us some answers. Eric Kono and La Paz says, police recruitment is now done by protocol and no check is done on their background. This is what he suspects. And just a few more on Twitter, and then Emmanuel can come in on the matter. Okay, so I've seen this one already. Emmanuel, so your thoughts on recruitment, possible reform, and just all these officers and some of the crimes that they are being linked with, and what the police service can do to deal with it.
Okay. Well, thank you. You see, with the recruitment, it has now become a national tragedy. I say so because you see all manners of people in society, especially high-ranking people in society, our chiefs, pastors, making calls for their relations or one way or other to be considered for into most of these services. If you look at crime and police involvement, more often than not, I was speaking with a senior officer, and he tells me we should look at the trend. It started after multi-party democracy started in 2002 in the 4th Republican Constitution, 2000. Police officers before then are very disciplined, and you don't see them.
It's too sweeping.
It's too
We've
sweeping.
always had reports. It's always been there.
Like
Honorable Toby told you.
But it has become rampant because
right.
I'm just using this as an example.
You remember the recruitment? The one they were doing Tibiru report. No. It's a human problem. It's always been there.
Go on.
So to come to that, you see, I understand. Per my independent investigation, one of the suspect is an ex-convict. It's Pablo, the one who shot Constable Emmanuel. Like my brother said, proper checks were done. I'm not sure we would have been where we are today. And my brother, you agree with me that in the police service today, it is pluralized, NDC, NPP. Promotions of certain officers happen when a particular party is in power or where you are sent to. And that lowers the morale within the service. So if you don't have the need to sacrifice for your country and your wedding uniform, what do? You divert that energy into criminal enterprise. And I think that the reason I said the Ghana police needs a reform is that it's more endemic as compared to other security agencies. And before reforms can happen, we need to shake the foundation. And shaking the foundation is doing a mass transfer of most of the junior officers across, so that you decouple and delink their linkages to alleged criminal enterprises of, Then you do a silent profiling of certain officers or who were recruited over a period. And I think the CID department has a lot of work to do. And once they have regional commands cooperating in this, I'm not sure it's a difficult thing to do. If we don't do mass transfer of these junior officers, any reforms will come to nothing. We'll talk, it becomes a talk shop, we'll see the same things happening. And you see, we have a system in our service too that is not helping us, godfathers. You see junior officers having godfathers, so when they misconduct themselves and they subject them to the disciplinary action, a big man somewhere will call and say, drop it, and it's done. Or our chiefs, or our politicians. You see, I always say security has no color. So let's try, both the NDC and the NPP, and for one, say that enough of this protocol recruitment, and let's begin our system where recruitment is merit-based, so that you can get committed people who are prepared to serve in the uniform. Because of the youth badge and youth unemployment challenges, most of the youth today are going into the service not because they really want to serve, but they are using it as a stepping stone to get something into their pocket. That's why if you look at the police service, when they are there and they get opportunity to travel, they leave. They abandon the service. And if you look at the statistics, more junior officers are abandoning their posts and traveling abroad when they get that opportunity. Because, you see, you get an opportunity to go for peacekeeping and stuff. When you go and you come back over the period, if you want to travel like for a holiday because you're a peace officer, they assume that you don't have any incentives to remain on the other side. And most go and they don't come back. And it's a cost to the national purse because we use our scarce resources to train these personnel. And I also think that in the case of this very issue we are discussing, I am surprised that the officers who led this operation leading to the deaths of these suspects are not interdicted. Because this is a serious crime.
But will that not be borne out of, for instance, what Superintendent Richard Tobu mentioned? And after reports,
but look,
they look at it before they can take such an action.
When this incident...
Because interdiction is a strong position to take.
When this incident happened, how many days now, Martin?
Today is Saturday.
And you think that
Wednesday.
If there's a cabal within the service, they will not take steps to cover up. And the preservation of evidence is important. I think that families of these deceased persons should have been notified, and an autopsy, an independent autopsy, performed on these bodies, such that they can preserve the evidence. Looking at the future, that the public inquiry I'm calling, all this evidence will be put together, and Ghana becomes the beneficiary. I also think that, Senior, it's about time we start using our ammo cameras in operations like this. In the
body cams.
The body cams.
But are they there?
They are there.
Because after there was a series of incidents where we were told that
the body cams are there.
You know,
the body cams are there.
When you talk about body cams, you need to have a mental orientation of the police officer to get him to the level where he can wear a body cam. You know what? In Ghana, you just ask many of the government departments. You have a vehicle that has a fuel monitoring device fixed into the vehicle. And after 1 week, it is deemed to spoil. They will tell you it's spoiled. Yeah. Why? Because the driver doesn't have the mentality to understand that I must be strictly accountable. Because he knows that his boss is driving around, excuse me, is a thief. So why should I be an angel? You want me to be an angel to drive a thief? I would not do that. So you fix in the device there, after 1 week it's spoiled. So you go and find body cams and give it to police officer to wear. The first thing you must do is get an orientation, a training program that will bring them to the level of the UK, the US. The mentality is that I want to serve and I want to be transparent. I am not in here to make money. If you don't have that thinking and you give them the body cam, I'm telling you, within 1 week, 100 body cam, you can have 50 of them having defects.
So it means that we are continuously causing financial loss to our states by using scarce resources to procure all these things, when we know that we have not prepared our personnel enough to use those body cams or services. Because
no.
You remember,
if we have the body cam, we can actually train them to fit.
No, but you remember just recently, even the elements they wear, they put
the go cams.
The go cams on it. And it came as a result of what happened on the M1, if you remember, 2-3 years ago. So, if we had this in place, like it happened in advanced democracy, we would not even be talking. They'll call for the body cam. And so we can see how the operations
took place. So perhaps a start would be for high-level raids like this. You must wear the body cam. And that's because SWAT operations body cams. So that we know independent accounting.
Excellent.
That's an interesting proposal, Emmanuel.
And very compelling. Very compelling.
You remember this year because people said this particular operation was very complex.
and intelligence-led.
That's the intelligence-led, yet complex. Yes. You know, but I was happy that they knew it was complex before the operation. They were guided by intelligence.
Excellent.
So I'm expecting the IGP to be bold enough and say, let's look at it. Listen, the police can be right. The police can be wrong. But as we see today, I've always said this, unless that scene is reconstructed.
Excellent.
And professionals sit down to look at it. Because if the police are wrong, they should learn from it. If they are right, let the public know. These are this
and pay the right compensation.
Exactly.
And finally, I think that the service is the Ghanaian citizens are the beneficiaries. So the IGP need to address the country and reassure us, because from all indications, especially from this incident, it's not only in Ghana, many countries, even the US, you remember the cocaine thing where senior officers were involved, and it took so many years, even in the US with that sophistication,
to
break them down. It's a human institution. You know, the bad notes are everywhere. So I think that the IG should address the nation and then give us some assurance. And those officers who were involved in this particular operation should be interdicted.
That's what you think. Well, yes. Let me add that we hope we do hear from the police service again on this particular matter, as they go, because the investigations are ongoing, not just into this, but as they've indicated to us, they are pursuing 5 other civilian suspects who have gone into hiding. We wish the police well in arresting these suspects and making further breakthroughs in this case.
But look,
whilst also keeping an eye on these incidents that have come through. Hopefully, we also hear from the Interior Minister and the Defense and Interior Committee in Parliament as well on some of these particular matters. Because if you look at the amount of monies that were lost during the bullion van robberies,
It's a lot.
this is one of the biggest cases the police have on their table at the moment, and so we expect to be updated. For instance, if you look at the Adedenko incident, it wasn't just the policeman that lost his life. You had bystanders,
a pregnant woman,
yes, who also got injured in all that. So we have cause to be very interested in this, and the fact that we have questions does not mean you go into hiding. So this COP Kwesifori, we hope to hear from you again. You're just
in fact, there was a last point I forgot to mention. Look, the principal witness in this crime were the two officers they killed.
For now, who are gone.
So the case is dead on arrival.
Not necessarily.
Look,
not necessarily.
The other suspects they have arrested, if they say they don't know about it, they just mention their name. You're a lawyer. It's your words against their word. Because the principal suspects that agreed and said they were involved and gave you the details, you've taken them out. So the case is dead on arrival.
Unless maybe there is another evidence.
There is a dangerous preposition that is being bandied around, and it scares me to the core.
Okay.
People are beginning to say, oh, maybe there are some bigger fishes. So they want to kill...
It's a school of thought.
Yes, it's a school of thought.
And it's allowed.
Yes, I understand.
It's okay.
They want to kill this and kill the case. Let me tell you, from the security perspective, if they are actually dangerous fishes who are beneficiaries of all these nefarious activities by these young boys, and they decide to go and kill these ones, it is of course, a huge criminal network. It's an organized crime. So if we kill two, the others will feel threatened that if we are all in this, and finally these boys are exposed, and you can't help them out, and you rather go and kill them, it means that tomorrow it can be my turn. Don't be surprised. One day you see a constable or a lance corporal carrying a gun and shooting a senior officer to death because you are the bigger beneficiary of what we are doing. You know of it. So if you cover it up and finally you start to kill us, it becomes dangerous. I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that these are just young men, scrupulous young men who found themselves in uniform and they want to take advantage of uniform to cause mess. So if we get them, let's arrest them one after the other and make sure that the law takes its own course. But for me, killing, it doesn't matter whether you are an honorable one or it's not allowed anywhere. Even in Ghana, when we are sentenced to death, how many people have we got the president signing for them to be executed? So that's killing is not something that we should encourage. So if you shoot a witness, a star witness like this, and kill the person. Somebody was saying, where's the esprit de corps? Police shooting police and killing? I don't want to believe that. I want to believe Kwesifori, who says that there was a crossfire. But that crossfire can only be clearer to all of us if the scene is reconstructed. Until then, the IGP, I want to believe that after all these reports, when you read through, you come to the Ghanaian people as honest as you are, as bold as you are. The police were right. These are the facts. Oh, the police were wrong. We've learned from it and paid the desired compensation. And the matter is gone. And we take steps to be able to put the police in a perspective that will enhance our democracy.
But senior,
yes.
Look, if there was a crossfire and the police know these were hardened criminals, is the police telling us that those criminals have more firepower than the police?
Well, they have said that they have asked for information on persons with gunshot wounds. So we'll take that one there. Let me just say, read this one from Peter from Nungwa. Says, it's unfortunate how politicians have taken over the process of selecting men and women into the security service. It is killing the zeal, and he puts into brackets, morale of even the old and fine officers and men. Discipline and moral uprightness has died an artificial death. I was happy when the chief of Lameshugu in Tamale spoke truth to power, that politicians should allow security people to do their work when it comes to recruitment and selection when it is time for such. It's also unfortunate background checks have stalled for some time now. Jerry Ofer Adro from Abusio Kind says, I think it would have been prudent to at least have the police service protect the lives of these two suspected police criminals at all costs, because their deaths will rather make way for a similar occurrence to repeat itself. There would have been great witnesses to help curb the reoccurrence of these incidents. Seto from East Legon says, I agree with Honorable Tobu, but is the police ready to implement change? Look at what happened with the RSO report. Again, are police allowed to wear tattoos and earrings? And that's a question he's asking. And then, good morning, panelists. Concerning the police situation, where two of them were shot and died, there's a lot of doubt. It could be they were shot to cover up, or they didn't want more information coming out. But either way, I am suspicious. And Nene also sends a message about the worrying trend of criminals being killed by police recently. So he wants more to be done about that. And Babamu from Tamale Central sends greetings to Honorable Peter Tobu and says we need to change the policing model in Ghana. So I will check Twitter and see. Okay, so proverbial Twitter says the police who is to protect us is rather killing and robbing you. The speaker who is also presiding is also voting. Come on. Proverbial Twitter, come on. And that is an interesting one. Todia Kofi Tonya Lee Jogad says, please tell the panelists singling out junior ranks to revise his notes. Most of the senior ranks are the masterminds behind
that's the point I was making.
These incidents that we see. So I will end this part of the conversation on the big issue and move on to the second phase.
A second?
Yes, don't worry about that. I will take a break now, and then when we return, we'll go to the Supreme Court landmark ruling that came out from the courts this week. Has elicited responses from the president, from both sides of the House. The Speaker has spoken, the Deputy Speaker has spoken. We've had comments from opinions, let me say, from lawyers, from jurists, who are all sharing insights into what looks like an interesting development in the word jurisprudence? Mm-hmm. In the jurisprudence space, mm-hmm. Something that those who study the area say might change the way we look at some of these things. Also, perhaps time to brings up questions of time to look at the Constitution again, changing orders, and how we're just not ready for this kind of parliament that we have. It has brought up so many questions of law, mm-hmm. including this particular one, and I'm sure it will not be the last question of law that will come up as a result of the current makeup of the legislature. We'll take a break, and when we return, that conversation will be on. Welcome back to the big issue, and we will now move on to the ruling of the Supreme Court. Some have called it landmark, significant milestone. You can tell me what you think of it and what it means to you as a Ghanaian, as a person interested in, public policy and the legislature and everything. But to have this conversation, I've made some substitutions to my squad for the day. So Martin Kwebu is still here, but let me introduce the Honourable Member of Parliament for South Dai and the Honourable Member of Parliament for Gushegu. So Honourable Roxy Nelson Dafiameko is the Member of Parliament for South Dai. Honourable Dafiameko, good morning.
Morning, my brother.
Thank you for finding time for us this morning. And Honourable Hassan Tampuli, Member of Parliament for Gushegu, good morning.
Thank you.
But Hassan,
good morning.
A lot of people don't know you're a lawyer.
Oh, really?
Yes. A lot of people just think you're a man in the energy space.
Oil man.
Yes, they see him as an oil man. Somebody might tell you, Hassan Tampuli is a man who just deals with, oil.
I said the truth, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But
I said a lot too.
Yes, he's a lawyer of long standing. So don't be too surprised to hear him talk the law.
These are my seniors.
Talk the law. Franklin Kujo is also still with us. But just to wrap up quickly, so the Supreme Court on Wednesday upheld Deputy Speaker Joseph Osei-Owusu's decision to count himself for the purposes of quorum in the November 30, 2021 budget approval. Now, this has sparked a debate on the constitutionality or otherwise of the action. We'll hear from our court correspondent, Sixtus, who covered that. We'll hear from the first Deputy Speaker, Joseph Osei-Owusu, and then we will also hear from the President, who has defended the Supreme Court after it ruled. And he says that the judiciary has the sole responsibility of interpreting the law. So we'll hear a wrap-up of what happened in court. Yes, we'll hear from the Speaker. we'll hear from the Speaker, don't worry. I'll read the Speaker's statement in full from yesterday. So, Deputy Speaker, we'll hear the 6-2 do the wrap-up. You'll hear from Joseph Osei-Owusu, you'll hear from the Speaker, and then the President. We'll do that quickly, then come in studio and begin the conversation.
In its unanimous decision, the Supreme Court ruled that a Deputy Speaker or any other member of the House presiding over the business of the House does not lose his or her right to vote while presiding. Such a Speaker or Member Speaker can also be counted as part of the quorum for decision-making in the House under Article 1041 of the 1992 Constitution. Consequently, upon this, the Apex Court struck down Order 1093 of the Standing Orders of Parliament, describing it as unconstitutional. The said order provides that a Deputy Speaker or any other Member of Parliament presiding over the business of the House shall not retain his original vote while presiding. The judgment flows from an application for interpretation filed by Law Lecturer Justice Abdullahi following that 30th November 2021 controversial budget approval. He asked the court to declare that 1, based on Articles 102 and 1041 of the 1992 Constitution, a Speaker or any other person presiding over Parliament cannot be said to be part of the members present for the purposes of decision-making, and that 2, the first and second Deputy Speakers, when presiding over Parliament, have the same authority as the Speaker of Parliament and can therefore not be counted as members present for the purposes of taking a decision in accordance with Article 1041 of the 1992 Constitution. He thus wanted the Supreme Court to declare that the decision taken on 30th November 2021 to approve government's 2022 budget amounts to a nullity and is of no effect. The 7-member Supreme Court, however, held that a member speaker is entitled to be counted for purposes of quorum for doing business and to vote in business of the House, even while presiding. The Attorney General and Minister for Justice, Godfred Yeboah-Dame, said the interpretation placed on the provision was simple and straightforward.
It's quite simple and straightforward. I perceive the issues are very simple and straightforward because nowhere in the Constitution has any statement be made that whenever a Deputy Speaker presides, he loses his right to vote. And indeed, as I indicated in submissions for the report, all the circumstances under which a Member of Parliament will lose his right to vote have actually been spelled out in Article 104 itself. And so it is really devoid of controversy. And it's also very important to know that in all jurisdictions around the world, whenever the Speaker of Parliament or a Deputy Speaker of Parliament is a Member of Parliament, he always has the right to vote. In England, it's the same. In America, it's the same. In Australia, Canada, everywhere it's the same. In Kenya, even in Africa, Kenya, South Africa, it's also the same. Whenever the Speaker of Parliament or a Deputy Speaker of Parliament is an MP, he never loses the right to vote. The right to vote.
The landmark judgment of the Apex Court filtered in when the House was still in session. The Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu was the first to react.
Our attention has been drawn to a very disappointing ruling of the Supreme Court of Ghana, which more or less amounts to a judicial interference in time-tested parliamentary practice and established conventions everywhere in the world, in civilized democracies, including the United Kingdom. The presiding officer's vote is discounted. So it's not for nothing that Article 102 provides that a person presiding shall have no original nor custom vote. The Supreme Court, to put it aptly, this ruling is judicial support for e-levy, nothing more. Judicial support for e-levy for a struggling economy in distress, and judicial support for the restoration of a matter that they have said is constitutional, is repugnant to the provisions of Article 102 and 104. But what can we do? they are clothed with the mandate and authority to interpret the law. This is a travesty. This is a travesty of parliamentary justice.
After sitting was adjourned, the first Deputy Speaker, Joseph Oseus, whose action triggered the suit, also reacted.
This decision affirms that position that I took. I find that very refreshing. Soon after that decision, a former Speaker of Parliament called me and he said, I called you to congratulate you for being bold to take this decision, because that is how the frontiers of the law are expanded. Matters that have never arisen are now in the fore because of the numbers we have in the chambers. So anytime there is disagreement, as I've said already, I will interpret the rules and the law as I understand it. I encourage people who disagree with me to boldly state their position and, if need be, refer to the appropriate body like the Supreme Court to guide us.
If you are denied the right to vote, it will mean it is tantamount to denying the right of the people you represent to have a say in the decision of the Assembly. That would not be right. So I couldn't understand what all of this furore and controversy that was artificially generated. We're being told that the decision of the court amounts to judicial interference in the work of Parliament. I'm not quite sure that the people who are saying this have actually taken the time to read the Constitution of our country. It says so in black and white. The legislative power of Parliament that is vested, of the state which is vested in Parliament, is subject to the provisions of the Constitution. All organs of the Ghanaian state, including me as the head of the executive, we are all subject to the teachings of the Constitution. There's no body in the Ghanaian state that is above the fundamental law of the land.
So that's the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, sharing his thoughts on the Supreme Court's ruling, saying no arm of government, of the state, is above the law. This elicited a response from the Speaker of Parliament, and that's, I will read. It says, "Good morning, comrades." This was on the Facebook page of Parliament's Facebook page, basically. So it says, "Good morning, comrades. I have resisted the temptation of making a comment on the judgment of the Supreme Court on the issue of the voting rights of the deputy speakers when presiding, but the unfortunate and myopic comment of the President has compelled me to let it out. The Supreme Court decision is, to say the least, not only an absurdity, but a reckless incursion into the remit of Parliament. The trend of unanimity is equally troubling. It doesn't help explore and expand our legal jurisprudence. The President's comment is myopic and unfortunate. It only goes to worsen the schism between the executive and Parliament. The impartiality of the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, or presiding officer has been treasured and fought for by this country throughout our democratic development. Mr. President, the issue being discussed is not about Parliament being above the law. Everyone knows that Parliament is not above the law. The executive and judiciary are equally not above the law. The issue being discussed is the political question doctrine. It took centuries to detail out the strands of this doctrine, and the principles are settled as to when and how this closed book could be opened. Please, I encourage the plaintiff to go for a review." Right Honorable Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin, Speaker, 8th Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. So that is his response to the matter. So I come in and I will begin with Lawyer Kwebu on this particular matter. AG says, simple and straightforward. Minority says travesty, judicial interference. Speaker says this is the political question doctrine. And so perhaps, in his estimation, the Supreme Court should not even have sat on this matter under the circumstances, since it's a political doctrine question. Your thoughts on on the ruling that came from the Supreme Court?
Okay. Yeah, so you see, from the comments you've made, they are all coming from different perspectives. And that's the nature of the game. So each person has his own views, okay? And it's all influenced by where the person sits You see it? And so that is the same thing about the decision. Yes, because, you know, from the way it is, it's difficult to say A is right and B is wrong. Okay, because, like, and I'm sure earlier on you referred to the jurisprudence. Okay, yes, in jurisprudence, so the legal philosophies. So one text, two different lawyers will look at it and have different understanding, and place different meaning on it. So that is what is at play here. So this morning as I was coming, I was like, what do I make of it? Like what you've asked. I'm like, to be honest with you, I think that Parliament should be given an opportunity to make an input. So straight off, I mean, without mentioning any words, I support the school of thought that somehow, not the review, but I know there's a way you can start a fresh action if you are not happy with this particular decision, so that Parliament itself, because the question I'm asking is, since the central theme of this suit was going to affect Parliament, Parliament should have been made a party, or at least officially invited that, do you want to put in an amicus brief? Do you want to put in an amicus brief? That's the least we could have done for Parliament if Parliament was not going to be made a party. So to the extent that we didn't hear from Parliament before the decision came in, I just think that I want to see...
What would Parliaments have done? So they would present their angle?
Yes, and that's very important.
But shouldn't that be by consensus? So you'd have the position of the majority-minority together. But with the current Parliament we have, how is that going to happen?
Well, we should have given the opportunity, because look, there's always, judges will tell you, there's always that, and it's well accepted. When a brief is not being fully argued, even in writing the decision, they will tell you that we haven't had the benefit of getting full arguments. And Parliament being a huge constituency in this kind of matter, a huge stakeholder, I think we should have heard from Parliament. It's very important. So for me, I think that, because what the judges have written, you can't fault them per se, because yes, they've used, you see, the rules of interpretation. They've used some to arrive at a certain conclusion. You can't fault that. The same rules, another lawyer looking at it would arrive at a different conclusion. And that's how it is. So that's why I think that Parliament should get a bite, should make an input. So maybe they will want to look at it and start a fresh action or something in that nature, so that we'll get full arguments, okay, into it. Because that way, when the decision comes, you know that all angles have been covered. Because I'm not sure the plaintiff in this case is well versed in parliamentary practice and all that. And within such a short time, yeah, so really, my point, and you know, the Supreme Court itself has indicated in other decisions that the AG is not always bound to represent even like the judiciary, their decisions. So sometimes you sue the Chief Justice, then AG comes to defend the Chief Justice. So there are other decisions that they subsequently said, no, the Chief Justice is permitted to choose his own lawyer and all that. So these matters concerning Parliament, I don't know why we should have left the AG alone to go and defend such a matter. No, at all costs, Parliament should have been involved.
So Parliament should have taken the initiative, or the Supreme Court should have invited them?
Both ways. So now, yes, I was asking my colleagues, and then they posed the same question. I was asking my classmates, and then some now pose the question, that shouldn't Parliament also have taken the initiative? Yes, now it's a lesson to them. It's not yet late. That's why we've chosen rule of law. So there's an opportunity for them to engineer a fresh brief. Then they can be heard. And then, of course, this time, we'll all go and research and come in, weigh in. Maybe we'll all make applications, amicus curiae brief, to, get in there and see whether now, with all the arguments from all the sides, perhaps could there be a change? Because, you know, this matter, what essentially was at play was that the judges made a value choice. Now, there were two competing choices. One, the value that the constituents, the people of the constituency of the deputy speakers, okay, deserve to be represented in all decisions. That's to say, so the MP should vote. As against the other value that there should be neutrality in the person presiding. So you see that in Article 104, Clause 2, says that the speaker should not have an original or casting vote, okay? So you see that we are making an attempt to have neutrality. Yes, the court says that, well, the word used there is speaker, not person presiding. So you see that when you read the judgment, they make the distinction that when it's not the speaker, the phrase used is person presiding. That is when it's any of the deputy speakers. Yes, all that, we've read it, but there still remains. So you see where the issue of the views of the judge, the jurisprudence, natural law, okay, sociological, okay, positive, those are philosophy. So like you see, constitutional writers, let me tell you, let's read this particular phrase, then you understand. This, the case of Professor Erwin Chemerinsky of in the United States, okay? It's a professor of constitutional law. This is the book he's written. The case against the Supreme Court. That's the U.S. Supreme Court he's talking about. So at page 340, this is what he says. Just to make it easier, I'll just go straight to the point. He says that what is reasonable requires a choice by the justice or judge. It cannot be determined based on the text of the Constitution or its original meaning. It is all about the judge's perception of reasonableness, which is a product of the judge's life experiences and views. Let me repeat. It is all about the judge's perception of reasonableness, which is a product of the judge's experiences and views. There's another book, when you go to first year law school, Cardoso, Learning the Law, they tell you that the judgment you have, okay, it's often a reflection of what the judge has had for breakfast, whether the judge is fighting with his wife or she is fighting with her husband, all those things. So there's a lot of jurisprudence in it. It's not, what do you call it, all cut and dry, very straight. It's not as straight as, so there's a lot of views and experiences, okay, that influences the way the judge sees the text. That's why I think that Parliament should take the initiative, re-engineer a brief, and then let's see what comes out of it. And I'm sure this time, more people, academics and the rest, should also apply, weigh in. Let's have more arguments from all sides so that we could then, whatever decision that comes out, then I'll say, oh, this has been fully argued. But once Parliament didn't make an input, I don't take it as being fully argued. No, because look, they tell you that he who feels it knows it. He who feels it knows it. So bring the people who are using the law and who are feeling it. Let them also have their say. Well, like we're saying, they too, it looks like they've been a bit indolent. So, well, they should make up for it by re-engineering a fresh brief, and then let's see how it pans out.
Okay, so then let me come to Anawoda, your take on the verdict or the ruling of the Supreme Court on the 3 reliefs that were sought. Your side, obviously not very happy, feel that justice was not done in the matter. What exactly are your points of divergence with what you saw?
Thank you very much. Let me say good morning to my brothers here, yourself, and my viewers, especially in Southern. Peki Kwalikwe Tongo. Let me predicate my submission on a quote from Professor Justice Aaron Barak, former president of the Israeli Supreme Court. He's a very acclaimed author on interpretation. In fact, he has a book called Purposive Interpretation. He's a foremost scholar in these matters. And he has this to say: in carrying out a purposive interpretation of a constitution, it's necessary to distinguish between its subjective and objective purposes. The subjective purpose of a constitution is the actual intent that the authors of it, namely the framers of the constitution or legislature, respectively, had at the time of the making of the constitution. On the other hand, the objective purpose is not what the author actually intended, but rather what a hypothetical reasonable author would have intended given the context of the underlying legal system history and values of the society for which he is making the law. This subjective purpose will thus usually be interpreted to include the realization through the given legal text of the fundamental or core values of the legal system. Now, one of the core values or ethos of our legal system is the impartiality, fairness, non-partisanship of our speakership in our parliamentary democratic jurisprudence. The same principle is imported into our judicial system, which anchors fundamentally the legal system that we operate. That's the core values. Reading the Constitution throughout, these principles run through. So it is not for nothing that the speakership is occupied by 3 persons. And the speakership, let me say this, the speakership is not a sole proprietorship office. It's not a one-man business office. We have a prefect and 2 deputies. That is why in the absence of the speaker, some constitutionally identified officers called the first deputy and the second deputy are asked to act. And that is why Article 295 defines the situation where when you are asked to act in a position of the substantive, you are ascribed with all the powers and functions of that office. But there was some attempt to sort of distinguish that in the judgment. Then we'll get there. So reading the entire judgment, it gives me a certain attempt to judicially intrude into established principles and ethos of parliamentary practice. Here's how. The suggestion is made that when I am elected as a member of Bekwai, and I leave Bekwai and I travel to Accra to effectively perform the functions of my office, and before that is done, I am further asked by my own colleagues of Parliament to be nominated to be elected to serve in the role as a first deputy speaker. And I accept the nomination and I go ahead to get elected into that office. I am, as it were, being deprived of my ability to serve my people. It's a problem for me. Because it's a special constitutional arrangement that when you are because when you leave Bekwai, or let me use my situation. When I leave South Dine and I'm in Accra, they elect as the elected representative of the people of South Dine, and I get nominated and I consent and get elected as the first deputy speaker of Parliament of the Republic of Ghana, I have consented to performing additional duties, which comes with rights, privileges, courtesies. And the Constitution says, when you function in that role, there will be occasions where certain rights of yours will be ousted temporarily. So when in the unavoidable absence of the speaker, I am asked to take the speaker's chair, that black chair, that green chair, whichever color we want to ascribe to it. When I sit on that chair, I assume additional powers, which includes what? The ability to now determine who speaks on the floor. I don't get that when I sit among my ordinary members, when I assume my ordinary seat. But when I take the speakership chair, I now have the power to determine who speaks on the floor and for how long
and in fact, on which matters you can speak. I determine which businesses are carried by agreeing to a motion for variation of the order of business, for instance. So I determine which businesses are carried. Indeed, I determine and I discipline when a member's conduct is capable of creating disruption for parliamentary proceedings. I have the power to order the marshal to take you out. I have the power to even ask visitors to leave the gallery. Those are the powers ascribed to you, imposed in you, inherent in you when you sit on that special seat. So, and I also have the power of all the powers I have the power to determine the vote. In fact, when a voice vote is put, and I hear the ayes and I hear the noes, I have the power to decide where the gavel falls. And the Supreme Court is saying that with all these powers, I still need to be able to have a vote to vote, a right to vote, because I decide where the gavel falls. I decide that the ayes have it or the noes have it. That is more powerful than participating in the vote. Much, much more powerful. So, like my brother said, there are jurisprudential difficulties for me. I said somewhere that I think the reasoning behind the ruling is logically wrong, legally wrong for me, jurisprudentially wrong. The person asked me why. I gave a few reasons. Logically wrong because when you say that, for instance, a verbatim borrowing of the Constitution reproduced in Order 1093 of our standing orders, denying the deputy speakers of the right to vote. It's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional because that's what the Supreme Court is saying, and therefore they've been struck down or they've been struck out as void because they conflict.
What do you call the verbatim?
Which one is the verbatim? Order 1093.
Yes.
It's not from the Constitution.
Why?
It's not from the Constitution.
Why is it not?
No, but check.
Why is it
Because it's
not?
the verbatim.
No, it's
it's a reproduction.
No, just
Order
in the spirit.
Order
Maybe the
193.
spirit of it.
A deputy speaker or
Very
any
well.
other member presiding shall not retain his original vote while presiding. There's no such thing in the Constitution.
So the spirit may be by the
Let
way
me
you see
demonstrate.
it.
Let me demonstrate.
Okay.
Now, if you go to Article 102, Article 102.
Yeah, apart from the speaker.
With your permission. Yes.
Please go on.
Yes. Article 102 says that a quorum of parliament apart from the person presiding shall be 1/3. No, that shouldn't be 102.
Oh, 104.
104. Sorry.
104.
Plus 2. That's
Yes.
the one that says.
Yes, the speaker shall have
neither
an
original.
original or a casting vote. All right.
The speaker.
Now, the speaker. It's immaterial. The speaker.
The speaker.
But the speaker, that position has been defined to include the deputy speakers by the same constitution. I am struggling to appreciate the fact that the court want to suggest that there's a distinction. The court says that when you are in an acting capacity, and remember that your right to vote being ousted isn't permanent. It is only when you sit in that chair. But it appears that all the analysis point to the fact that you have been denying that right as in your role as deputy speakership. But that cannot be. In fact, when you are at plenary, you vote on all matters. You have the right to participate. In fact, they have special privileges. When they are up, they are most recognized. When any of the deputies are up as part of the general membership, to be able to be recognized by the speaker for purposes of debate, even sometimes their premium is given to them over leaders, the two leader, minority leader, majority. That is how. These are the ethos These are things that you cannot gloss over. You can't treat as de minimis, inconsequential. These are special arrangements. So my argument is that when you make the case that Order 1093 conflicts with the Constitution, show me exactly how it conflicts with the Constitution when the Constitution says these two deputy speakers, in their role as speakership, in their role as presiding members, presiding speakers, do not have voting rights. They can't vote on a matter in clear conformity with Article 295.
But in saying that in their ruling, if you read it, there's an emphasis on required to be members of parliament.
Yes.
And must remain members of parliament to hold office as deputy speakers.
Yes.
And I'm reading clearly.
Yes.
I'm reading verbatim. It says, from the clear language of the Constitution, certain important implications flow from the fundamental distinction between the speaker and the deputy speakers.
That is where they fell into an error of interpretation.
You think so?
They are assuming that the deprivative requirement of right to vote is permanent. They have forgotten that it is only when you are in the seat. They've also forgotten that when you are in the seat...
I don't think they've forgotten, like they say. They referred to it and said yes. So it means that when the person comes to assume the seat, then he loses the vote. They have a point, but I think maybe overstretching it. Perhaps it would be better if you guys come and make your own case. I think we have to be fair to the justices. They are not here. So some of the
maybe if I say they gloss over it.
They looked at Article 295 and they referred in the absence of the speaker, the deputy, and they refer to that when the speaker is not there, the deputy acts. Okay, and so they are aware.
But let me say that they fell into an error of interpretation. Because when you are in that seat, you wield a more heavier power, which is you determine the outcome of the vote.
So you are expecting them to make a decision of
whether
the deciding the vote is more important or representation is more important. And representation is the key.
You see,
it depends on
even that presumption that when you become a deputy speaker as a member of parliament and you assume the speakership seat and you are in charge of affairs of proceedings, you cease to exercise your right as the elected representative of your people. It's a problem for me.
I'll give you time.
It's a big problem for me. For that presumption to have been made and relied on without further critical thinking regarding the peculiar proceedings of Parliament. Because when we adopt, is now the law. If we apply this law, the effect, for instance, it will have further is that, because I heard Jay say it, the majority leader, Honorable Chairman Sabons, that by parity of reasoning, by operation of law, our committee sittings will also be affected. And it will be affected with absurd consequences. And I'll demonstrate that. When you take I'll
give you 5 minutes on your first part.
E-levy bill. If you take the e-levy bill, the committee members had to make a determination regarding whether or not the bill be taken under certificate of urgency. What is this report?
They had to vote.
We had to be taken to a vote. The NDC members voted against it. The 13 MPP members, minus the presiding member, 12, they voted for. So it was a tie. A tie at committee level, the motion is not lost. At committee level, but at plenary it would have been lost. But at committee level, when there's a tie, the chairman has a casting vote inherent in him as the chair. So Kweku Kwating had to cast his vote to tilt it. So it became 13-12. All right? By this decision, what it will mean is that if, under such circumstances, one member of the committee was unable to attend, it means the chairman will now have an original vote to move it from 11 to 12, and it will still be ascribed with a casting vote to tilt it. You understand what that means?
Yeah, to ensure parliamentary business continues.
Thank you. So that is the absurdity, that where we say that you wouldn't have the power to, you wouldn't have the original vote, the right for original vote. Supreme Court now says that you have to have the right for original vote as well as a casting vote inherent in one chairman.
Which is not unusual.
It's most unusual.
It's not unusual.
It's most unusual. It's most unusual. So these are the issues.
But let me read something.
Yeah.
On that note, in the ruling at the end, it says it must be emphasized, however, that the procedural and or operational rules to practicalize the protection of this constitutional right in a member presiding in the absence of a speaker and his or her duty to represent his or her constituents in the vote and decision on matters within the exclusive domain of Parliament itself. Okay. Parliament may achieve this by amending its orders or adopting parliamentary practices to give effect to this constitutional imperative.
Now, the position,
is that not an out?
No. The position simply is that for all that we have done as a court, the entity to give effect to it is again Parliament itself. So it's like a journey to nowhere.
Really?
Yes. It's like a journey. Now Parliament will be called upon to enact regulations or orders to give effect to this. What will Parliament do? Because our duty will be to give effect to this. But how are we going to do it?
Okay.
You understand? So the interpretation, the whole judgment for me failed to give critical analysis to the peculiarities of Parliament.
You are worried that the court respected the language of the Constitution? Because that is clear.
No, the court didn't respect the language of the Constitution.
You don't think so?
I think the court rather, for me, interpreted the constitutional language in a manner not purposive of the framers.
Okay.
Because the framers had a purpose to put all those provisions. And finally, the language on page 23, you know, the use of opportunistic absence is a problem for me. For a court, not just any court, but for the Supreme Court to use this language in respect of the office of the speakership amounts to me imputing improper motives. Because you see, the speakers of Parliament, the substantive and the deputies, when they are absent for a good cause. But we are suggesting that for some ill purpose, somebody could decide to be absent without reason.
It's very possible.
No?
It is possible.
You know, but you cannot impute improper motive.
But that's not what the judgment said.
That is why you suggest
it is likely.
What is likely?
That's a possibility.
Those are the things you don't say. Those are the things you don't. A court shouldn't be saying those things without evidence. When you have evidence, be categorical. Don't be suggestive. And that's my problem. Then finally, the court also said that when a deputy speaker ascends to the seat to preside, it's a mere process. It is such a ceremony. It is not everybody who gets up to occupy that seat when the speaker has to leave for a purpose. It's not everybody. Only 2 persons. And the Constitution says when those other 2 persons are absent, Then again, the House must go through a ceremony to elect one from amongst us to preside. It is not a mere process at all. You are elevated to assume certain rights, heavy duties of state. That is not ascribed to you when you are in your seat as an ordinary member of parliament. Not even in leadership. Leaders don't even have those powers.
Okay. Your point is made. Let me hear Honorable Tampuli. You've heard Honorable Daffy Amepo's position on the matter, where he thinks the Supreme Court could have gone in a certain way. You obviously, from the interventions you've made, seem to think differently. But just to be educated on this, was the Supreme Court called upon on the basis of the facts before it to decide on the voting rights of deputy speakers?
Thank you very much. So I'll come to your question in due course.
And we can consider that too.
Okay. First of all, let me just say hello to the good people of Gushegu who are in mourning. We lost our paramount chief. Tomorrow is the 7th day Adua. And we'll be having it at the palace in Gushegu. So you are all invited. I take this opportunity to invite all and sundry.
And our condolences as well.
Yeah. Thank you. So I would first of all like to deal with the matter that was raised by my senior on the right. So they are both my seniors. One to the right, so I'm very comfortably.
You in.
Yes, he is. So I have a lot of comfort. But the heat is coming from both ends. So let me try and then deal with the one from the right. So the senior Martin Pebu raised the issue about input from Parliament.
Yeah.
And whether there was the opportunity for us to have an amicus brief. I read from the official report of Parliament 15 February 2022. And these are the words of Right Honourable Speaker Alban Bagbin. He says that in view of the fact that there are issues about Deputy Speaker, whether he is acting, his right to vote or not to vote, I am happy that some members of Parliament are involved in trying to get clarification on these constitutional matters from the courts. Some of you have proceeded by issuing original writs at the courts for interpretation. They are welcoming developments because at the end of the day, we will be guided in these matters. These are new grounds, and this is the time for us to learn and improve on our system. So I want to urge you all to continue to maintain cool heads. Let us think through these matters together and find solutions to some of the conceptual challenges that the Constitution has imposed on the country. The Right Honourable Speaker was fully aware of the pendency of this matter in courts. Members of Parliament were fully aware. So I'm not too sure whether the principle of estoppel will not, be used as a shield against us if we knock on the doors of the Supreme Court asking that this matter be re-litigated. When we were fully aware, we have made comments to that effect publicly and officially captured in the parliamentary reports. So I'm not too sure how this
estoppel when it comes to constitutional matters. I don't know how estoppel does not override the constitutional provision.
I don't know how you can. Because if you are not aware, of course, if you are not aware, but you are fully aware, you could have gone into the courts to ask to be heard on these matters because you feel very strongly about it. And so if you juxtapose this position of Mr. Speaker against his comments after the judgment was delivered, I find something very, very, wrong with it. You said that the matter is in courts. So let's be guided by the judgment of the court. The courts have decided. And you are so upset you call it names and insults the president. So I'm thinking this particular one, Mr. Speaker, got it wrong. It's about time that we resolve this matter in a way that shows a certain level of, respect to the various arms of government. The courts are supposed to do the interpretation, not Parliament. Parliament make the laws. And when the judges speak, we have every right to criticize. Criticize in very, very strong language but you cannot take it to the level where it becomes an insult contest. So just to deal with that particular matter. To the main issues, so he dealt with Cardozo, he dealt with Aaron Barak.
Cardozo and the
Cardozo
yes.
So he dealt with, I would deal with SOA, Jesse, in the celebrated case of Tufo versus the Attorney General. And I take it from page 637. So this is what SOA had to say.
Okay.
The Constitution has its letter of the law. Equally, the Constitution has its spirit. It is the fountainhead for the authority which each of the three arms of government possesses and exercises. It is a source of strength. It is a source of power. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary are created by the Constitution. Their authority is derived from the Constitution. Their sustenance is derived from the Constitution. Its methods of alteration are specified. In our peculiar circumstances, these methods require the involvement of the whole body politic of Ghana. So he goes on to say, a broad and liberal spirit is required for its interpretation. It does not admit of a narrow interpretation. A doctrinaire approach to interpretation would not do. We must take account of its principles and bring that consideration to bear in bringing it into conformity with the needs of the time. Now, what is the bone of contention here? I've been told that the Constitution to be, this matter should have been purposely interpreted. Now, there are rules of application when it comes to purposive interpretation. Now, if you give the ordinary meaning to the text and the meaning is absurd or is incongruous, makes no sense, then you can move to the second stage. So we call it a two-stage affair. The ordinary meaning, and then you move to the purposive meaning. So there's no need for you to go to the second stage if the text is so clear. Under these circumstances, the text was very, very clear. So I do not see why we should go and deal with Aaron Barak's purposive interpretation when the text itself and our Supreme Court has said it on countless occasions. When the text is clear, you don't need to move to the second stage to do any purposive interpretation. Article 102, 104, and you are testing it against Order 1093. It's very, very clear. So you don't need to go, fishing for, resource when the resource is right in front of you. So I'm not too sure whether this matter, requires any further, academic input into it. It's very, very clear. There's no need for us to have gone to the second stage of looking for the purpose of the word. Now, there's been said that judicial intrusion into the affairs of Parliament. The courts have long held. They find it very, very difficult. In fact, the language is, they're reluctant to get into the affairs of especially Parliament. And there's a long line of cases, Tufo versus Attorney General, J.H. Mensah, Martin Namidu, and so on and so forth. So when the issue of political doctrine was raised, the learned justice of the Supreme Court, Yoni Kulendi, was quick to identify that as one of the things that we don't tolerate in our Supreme Court. By the language of Article 2 and Article 130, it does not admit of any political question before a matter in the Supreme Court. So you can't tell me that this matter is a political question, so the judges should stay away. Now, I'll give you an example. Article 78 says the president shall appoint ministers of state with the prior approval of Parliament. What does prior approval mean? Parliament has to decide. Now, Parliament can decide that we should cast lots. Parliament can say that we should do CC, Nanako, we should do anything. You see what I mean? Or Parliament can say we should look at their heights, look at their
weight,
anything. He said, prior approval of Parliament. That's what it says. So, Parliament now would have to go through the process of doing, putting in place appointments committee, and the standing orders have provided for the processes under which you have to appear as before the appointments committee and be considered. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria, for instance, if you are an ex-lawmaker and you are appointed a minister, most likely when you appear before the chamber, there's something that they call bow and go. So they don't even ask you a question. Because as a member of the house, you have served in the house before, you deserve that, that respect. So you just bow and go. That's what they do. If you are not an ex-legislator, then you are going through the vetting procedure. Now, Parliament also, the Constitution also says that the President will swear, take the oath of office before Parliament. Before Parliament. Now, this matter came up in 1996 when the Venerable J.H. Mensah insisted that the President-elect, Flight Lieutenant General Rawlings, of blessed memory, should swear the oath in Parliament. And the argument was made, and I remember very clearly, I'm not reading for it, I just remember from memory. At the time, it was said that Parliament can decide to go and sit under a tree and receive the President, and then they will administer the swearing in to him. So it doesn't matter where Parliament sits. It says that he will do it before Parliament. It doesn't mean that he should do it before a particular location. That one is left for the Parliament to decide. But where Parliament makes a law, orders, resolutions, and so on and so forth, the Supreme Court, when the matter becomes live before them, have an obligation to interpret. And I'll give you a very good example of the case of Martin Pebu, sitting to my right, versus the Attorney General, on the constitutionality of Section 96(7) of the Criminal Offences Act, Act 30, 1960. That was when the law was passed. Further amendments came along the way. But the matter had never come before the Supreme Court. So it continued to remain on the laws of our country. And the courts were applying them to insist that these matters are not bailable. And that is what it says. It lists murder, armed robbery, and so on and so forth. It said they are not bailable. It took him to go to the Supreme Court and said that by the language of Article 14 and Article 19, the combined effect of these provisions in the Constitution makes this unconstitutional. Because the person shall not be guilty until he is proven to be guilty. But this provision, Section 96(7), already confirms the person that the person is guilty. So he should stay in jail until such a time that the matter is resolved. The Constitutional Courts, which is in this case the Supreme Court, strike out Section 96(7) on the basis that when it is tested against the Constitution, it fails. So the Supreme Court is sitting back, and when a matter comes up, then they will decide. It's very, very likely that in these standing orders of Parliament of Ghana, there are some provisions in there which have never come up for discussion. And mind you, by this 137, 137, 1, we are likely to see more of these matters. Because a lot of issues are going to be contentious. Matters which were, hitherto very normal have become very, very contentious. So we are likely to see, more of these things going to the Supreme Court for interpretation. And so that takes us back to the point that you raised, whether or not the issue of the voting rights of the...
In your estimation, was that?
Of course. You cannot do this work that the Supreme Court did without necessarily talking about that matter. Because the essence of that matter was that the first deputy speaker shouldn't have voted. And so you have to resolve the matter whether he should have voted or he shouldn't have voted. Otherwise, you can't come to any firm conclusion.
Is that not when then, perhaps, Lawyer Kwebu's point then that if that was going to be determined, then perhaps it would have benefited from an argument from Parliament.
And that is what I said, that the Speaker was aware of the matter. The Speaker, and the Speaker takes those decisions.
So his failure to act cannot be
so he cannot be blamed on the Supreme Court.
Oh, certainly.
It's what I mean.
Supreme Court.
That's
We are just saying.
So
nobody's blaming the Supreme Court.
Just the point that we are making.
It's not yet late because.
No, the point he made is that the court suo motu could join parties.
Could have done that.
And
That
could
one
not
for sure.
suit. Okay. So those powers are also inherent in the court. So a party could be joined as an interested party. Suo motu directly from the
Parliament
court.
should have been very diligent.
I agree.
What the
Yeah,
Speaker did is
I
condemnable. I think he will also learn his lessons from it.
No. Why would you condemn
So
Speaker
then
in this matter?
It's okay, don't worry. Let's
we
make
come to
progress.
the point. We come to the point of the first Deputy Speaker first being elected by the good people of Bekwai, and then when he comes to Parliament, he's given additional responsibility. That does not take away his primary responsibility. It only gives the Speaker, the first Deputy Speaker, additional responsibility. He doesn't cease to be the Member of Parliament of Bekwai. And Justice Kulende was at pains to insist that the fact that you have been given additional responsibility does not mean that the people of Bekwai should lose their voice in Parliament. And so I find it very difficult to understand why, because I'm given additional responsibility, I should not continue to hold my primary responsibility.
But on that, hold on, let me just ask this. Do you not see reason, I'm choosing my words carefully, in the argument that is then made for where lies the balance of partiality then? Because, yes, you are a representative.
That's right.
But your task also requires you to maintain neutrality.
That's right.
How are we going to combine these two? Can we call them ethoses of some kind?
Yeah, the values. Like
the
you
values.
said, it's a choice between representation and this impartiality.
Is the Supreme Court
or
not putting it in a really tight corner?
You know, the other alternative, for instance, is that no member of Parliament, would opt to become a first deputy or second deputy speaker if I'm going to lose my rights to represent my people.
So you find another way of appointing a
So
deputy
then
speaker.
so then who becomes the first deputy speaker or second deputy speaker? Because I want to represent my people.
Thank you.
But I also want Parliament to work. All right? Now, the Speaker of the Australian Parliament has a vote.
Yes.
It's a member of Parliament elected. The Speaker of the Canadian Parliament is elected, has a vote.
On all matters.
The Speaker of Nigerian Parliament
on all matters.
has a vote.
On all matters.
Yes.
I have an answer to that. It's too sweeping. It's not as correct as those things.
On all matters. But on certain matters.
You wait.
They have casting votes.
Because I've seen some of the
Indian
examples
Parliament,
okay.
the Kenyan Parliament, the UK, Nigeria, South Africa.
Kenya deals with pecuniary interests.
The UK one is it's not as sweeping as what you're saying.
The UK one says that.
Vote to say that pass it to. He votes and it results in a further debate, or he says status quo remains.
Exactly.
So that way, wrong.
So can this judge? Exactly. It's the same thing that comes to the first deputy speaker.
Or
the first deputy speaker has a right to vote also along the same lines as these speakers of other jurisdictions. So I'm finding it very difficult that you said that we should continue to just extinguish the votes of the people of Bekwai. I mean, putting that against what is common sense. I think what is fundamental is that the people of Bekwai must be heard on the matter, and we can't do anything about it. So, Order 109.3 says that you cannot vote. But the Constitution doesn't take that right away from you. What the Constitution doesn't prescribe, as far as I'm concerned, impliedly is prescribed. If the Constitution wants to say that the Speaker of Parliament does not have a vote, it will say so. If the same Constitution wants to say that the first deputy speaker should not have a vote, it will say so again. So the judge takes us to one of the canons on interpretations. It says that the expressio unius rule, where there is an express mention of something, it is to the exclusion of others that have not been mentioned. So the speaker, under Article 104.3, it's been said that the speaker doesn't have a vote. But it doesn't say so. when it comes to
the deputy speaker or
deputy
the
or second
person
deputy
presiding.
Speaker. Then we come to the confusion under Article 102 and Article 104.
You have 2 minutes.
Article 102 provides us the quorum to do business, which is 92 of the 275, because we can't have half member of parliament. So the number comes to 92. The quorum to do business is distinguishable from the quorum to vote on a matter, to take a decision. So 92 says, and I read, Article 92 says, 102, sorry. Article 102 says, for instance, that, forgive me, a quorum of parliament, apart from the person presiding, shall be 1/3 of all the members of parliament. That is when you are going to commence the business of parliament. Then 104 says that, except as otherwise provided in this constitution, matters in parliament shall be determined by the votes of the majority of members present and voting, with at least half of all the members of parliament present. And that is 138. And then that is the quorum to take a decision. So we have to distinguish the two. Now, where in this 102 or 104 does it say that the speaker, the deputy speaker, cannot vote? 104.2 says the speaker shall have neither an original nor casting votes. There's nowhere in this constitution where it is said that the deputy speakers do not have a vote, neither an original nor casting vote. There's nowhere in this constitution. So what the constitution does not disallow, impliedly is allowed, as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Thank you very much. I
would like to just conclude on this.
We don't have to take a break.
Just Article 102.5.
Don't worry. Let me take a break and come back. I'll do another round. We can hear from Honorable Dafia Mekpo, Martin, and then Franklin, and then you on that matter as well. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Big Issue, and I hope you're enjoying the thoughts that have been shared on this ruling from the Supreme Court. So you can do that, 0549986996, 0550585832. Let me come back to Honorable Dafia Mekpo on the matter. You've heard the argument on the answer, but the question I asked, and I'll come back to that question again, was the matter of the voting rights really part of, did the facts that were presented in your estimation lead to that?
When a matter goes to court, there's a way of holistically looking at the matters arising. That is why after pleadings are filed, you set issues. So issues are gathered from the pleas of either side. The court itself has the power to sift out issues arising out of the pleadings. So to that extent, yes, the court has the power to touch on these matters. So I cannot take that away from them. But the one thing I want to touch on is the issue of the fact that even as part of the facts are set out by the court, I found something very interesting, that the court asserted that on the 30th of November, the quorum in Parliament was 137. The number of members present was 137, which conforms with the votes and proceedings from Parliament. But in respect of the 26th November one, the court said the number of members present was 137 when it was 274, according to the same votes and proceedings. And the court is a court of record. So I'm wondering what evidence, what material was produced or documents was produced for the court to rely on with such a figure. That's my other point. The next point is the fact that I keep hearing that the right to vote is denied. The right to vote is denied, but it is not. Of the deputy speakers, they don't lose the right to vote
while sitting.
It is when you go there. So it is an ouster. Even the jurisdiction of the courts, Parliament has the power to ouster the court's jurisdiction sometimes under circumstances. There are plethora of cases where the jurisdiction of the court is ousted. We call them ouster clauses in interpretation. For some, under some conditions, the court won't have jurisdiction to hear the matter until those conditions are satisfied or are exhausted. Even the jurisdiction of the court can be ousted. The right of a member who becomes a deputy speaker to vote is inherent in him, but it is ousted when you sit, when you exercise higher powers.
By which provision in the Constitution?
The Constitution, reading it holistically.
Which one? To string them together.
I have told you. The Constitution says a speaker includes a deputy speaker. You are saying no, and I'm struggling to appreciate why that is not the case.
But it is.
No,
it has been
said that 295 clause 2. Yes. It says in the context. So the court is saying that in this context, when they are referring to the deputy speakers, it's person residing. I'm just helping to bring out the judgment.
Yes,
so
no, I have read the judgment.
Yes, but I have to just remind you so that you can.
And I am struggling to appreciate the context that the court is referring to. Which context?
The context is what is in 104 and 102.
That is no context.
That is the context.
That is no context because the Constitution says, in the absence of the speaker, the two deputy speakers, Parliament, because you couldn't be rendering Parliament inoperative. Parliament cannot be rendered inefficient. So Parliament must vote one from amongst those members present to preside. When that person presides, he assumes the role of the speakership. Does it mean that his right to vote as a member of Parliament on matters is evaporates? No. It is for that temporal purpose. This appeals the spirit and the ethos underpinning our Constitution.
But you also appreciate the ruling where they indicate that they go this way to forestall mischief, in the sense of a speaker deliberately absenting himself to deprive.
No, and that's why I told you I have a problem. They didn't even say deliberate. They say opportunistic.
Opportunistic absence.
It's a very offensive phrase.
But you see, this judgment should not be about this Parliament.
No,
exactly Parliament in the future. It shouldn't be limited to this Parliament.
My point.
So don't take it to be personal.
No, it's not.
I'm not saying he has done so.
No.
It is for.
I think he's quite clear.
Can I finish? I am saying, I am not speaking because it's back. They didn't use the opportunistic in respect of speaker alone. They say speaker or deputy speakers. And I'm saying, a court couldn't be saying this about the speakership. Because there's a presumption of reasonableness of the things they do.
And unreasonableness.
No, there's no presumption of unreasonableness.
There's a presumption that
it is a presumption that can be rebutted.
Exactly. Something can be done unreasonably.
So I am saying that when a court is making these suggestions, I don't know what else to say, but I find it very interesting that a court can use this language.
Go and start your own suit.
So that is the other point. So for me, it is never the fact that the members as deputy speakers don't have voting rights. I hear people pushing that are they not members of Parliament? That is not the question. The question is when you are exercising the powers of the speaker. So my brother, when I get the opportunity in the future, maybe soon in the future, that the speaker is not there, the Joe Wise and Siamatu are not there, and the opportunity arises and I get elected to as a presiding member, Supreme Court says I have the right to vote, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so a very contentious matter is brought to Parliament. As a presiding member, and for what they've done, I can decide that it's only all the minority members who have a voice on the matter. And when we finish, then I put the question and we vote. That is the absurd.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's something, everything wrong about it.
Because there are remedies for dealing with that.
What are the remedies?
You can come by a substantive motion.
And do what?
And challenge the decision.
The decision of the speaker.
Of course, you can come by a substantive motion.
That is the absurd rules.
It is in the rules.
Okay, hold on. Let me hear from Maje.
Okay, so so far, the point I wish to draw attention to is that let's be careful about references to, the Attorney General stated that in the UK and the speakers vote.
They are not analogous.
We need more research on that matter. Let's not rush, because, look, even a quick search tells you online that when it comes to the UK, they have, when the speaker has to vote, they have what they call Dennis's rule. And that rule says that, so when there is a tie, and they ask the speaker to vote, there's something they call Dennis's rule. Dennis's rule, which we need to research, but at least a little so far, shows that the speaker votes resulting in further debate. So he doesn't vote that, I've cast my vote in favor.
He doesn't vote to tilt
case
it.
Closed. No, he votes that let's have further debate. So let's further, engage. Or he will vote that the status quo remains. So it's not for tilting. So please, let's be very careful. Let's not miseducate ourselves.
Is it the same thing in Canada,
let's not
Australia,
so
Nigeria?
Have you researched it?
Of course.
Bring the source here. What does the speaker vote? So I have mentioned Dennis's rule.
And I'm telling you what is happening in Nigeria. When Speaker Gbajabiamila is voting, he votes
to do what?
Not to tilt anything or to prolong anything, but to vote on a matter. As a matter of fact, we had a similar situation in the last parliament in Nigeria. The Speaker of Parliament, who...
Why are you a member of the
I studied it. Yakubu Dogara. He was from the APC, the President's Party. And then the president of the Senate, what's the name? Bukola Saraki, was also from the same party. But they broke ranks with their party. All right? So they were doing business with the PDP. Now, when it comes to matters of, voting, nothing stops them from voting.
You are quoting a law that is not applicable in Ghana.
That is what I'm saying. But
their constitution permits them to even cross carpet and still remain in parliament.
Exactly.
In our case, you cannot.
But those are the equals. As a matter of fact, by our constitution, a president can cross carpet and nothing will happen to him.
We are not speaking of president, we say parliament.
I'm telling you, but Nigeria doesn't happen like that.
You are talking of contest, so
but
let the matter in context.
Let me look at Article 295. I think you've made a lot of issue out of
he
it.
came in. I thought he gave me 2 minutes.
Yes.
So please, let's explain Speaker Dennis's rule. And after this, we do more research. Yes. He says that it's a constitutional convention. So Speaker Dennis's rule is that casting vote that the speaker is said to have. So he doesn't vote. That's the UK. He doesn't vote to tilt it. So if let's say it's 137, he will not vote as 138 and said, oh yes, the bill is carried, e-levy is carried or anything. No. He votes to result in further debate or leave it in its current form. So he says Speaker Dennis's rule is a constitutional convention established by John Evelyn Dennison, who was Speaker of the British House of Commons from 1857 to 1872, regarding how the Speaker decides on their casting vote in the event of a tie in the number of votes cast in a division. So blah blah, let's go this way. Dennison gave his casting vote against the motion, declaring that any decision must be approved by the majority. Good. So Dennison, so the rule of it, when he comes, when it's tied, he doesn't vote that, oh, boom, it's carried. No, he voted against the motion, declaring that any decision must be approved by the majority. Okay, the rule as subsequently adopted is that the speaker in any division upon a bill should vote to leave a bill in its existing form. So please, let's get further education before we mislead our people that when a speaker casts a tie, casting vote, he's doing it to make the bill carried. Please. It's very important. At least I've shown one here. Let's get further constitutional education before we mislead people.
Go on. I think the point that Mr. Kpebu is making is unassailable. But the point that I have to make about this particular position is that we are dealing with Article 102 and 104. What provision are we dealing with under the UK Constitution? They don't have a constitution. So you can't even measure it against any provision. We are dealing with express provision in our Constitution.
Thank you.
All right? The UK doesn't have a constitution. They have been doing it by convention and over time.
Thank you.
So you see, the supremacy of Parliament is very well established in the UK.
No longer under the 1992 Constitution.
All right.
The supremacy is the Constitution.
Constitutional law.
I'm saying that in Ghana we have the supremacy of the Constitution, but in the UK is the supremacy of Parliament.
No, even now with the establishment of the Supreme Court, their decisions are also subject.
They want to do what they want to do.
So that doctrine 689 has also
evaporated.
What they do is that they will recommend to Parliament.
Let me hear.
It's gone. It says that in this Constitution and in any other law, a reference to the holder of an office by the term designating his office shall, unless the context otherwise requires, be construed as including, and this is page 26 of the judgment, be construed as including a reference to a person for the time being lawfully acting in or performing the functions of the office. Now, it goes on to say, however, we wish to note that the words used, unless the context otherwise requires, used in 2952 above are instructive.
Yes.
With regards to the positions of Speaker and Deputy Speaker, the two are distinguished and contra-distinguished by the intra-constitutional context discussed above and found in Article 1, Article 95 and 96. In particular, but more generally in all. Now, I'll give you a good example. When the President is out of the jurisdiction, the Vice President acts. When the Vice President is out of the jurisdiction, the Speaker acts. When the Speaker is out of the jurisdiction, would the First Deputy Speaker act? Or Second Deputy Speaker, would they act?
The Constitution doesn't say so.
Exactly. So it cannot come down to that level. When we say that it's one speakership,
is wrong.
If it is one speakership,
if the Constitution had said so, that would have been the effect. The Constitution is very specific.
By necessary implication, Joe, why should you act as the President in the absence of Speaker?
No.
That is what you are saying.
No, that is warp logic.
The First Deputy Speaker does not get all the powers of the Speaker.
Constitutional provision to a non-existent one.
Exactly.
You can't make that asking us to do. You can't make that analogy.
You're asking us to do.
I am saying the Constitution has defined the position of a speaker to include the deputy speaker.
Your position
by 295, and you are saying no.
So if I'm acting in the stead of the speaker, then I should be.
You are saying that as the context requires. I want you to explain what
I'm telling you that if you are saying that if I assume the position of speaker as first deputy speaker, all the powers. And incidence of the office of speaker applies to me.
Yes.
Then when the vice president is out of the jurisdiction, I should be sworn in the absence of the speaker.
The Constitution doesn't say so.
No, but the Constitution is clear.
Exactly.
Constitution is very clear.
You are forcing us to say that the first of the speaker's vote is extinguished by virtue of the fact that he's presiding. And the Constitution doesn't say so. The same thing that you are telling me right now.
No.
So, it pleases you, but let me go to Article 2.
It's not about when
I've almost run out of time.
Article 2.
I've given all the time
any person or group of persons to whom an order or direction is addressed under Clause 2 of this article by the Supreme Court shall duly obey and carry out the terms of the order.
Your point is
which order is directed to anybody? Supreme Court says that Parliament shall by its own
deal with this matter.
I'm just telling you
Frankly, Kujo, I'm sure
no order has been the we've been requested to deal with it.
Sum this up for me.
We shall deal with it.
Frankly, sum this up for me.
They're casting votes right now.
Yes. Cast your vote.
That's my client. So don't be on my side. That's my client. That's my client.
Go on.
He's doubting.
Let's hear Franklin. Please, let's hear Franklin. Franklin, go on.
I've been a lot of very educative commentary made. I mean, legal commentary made on this matter. And I like to go with the position that, I mean, when judges are deciding cases, they are also imbued with the experiences of their lives and indeed the exigencies of the time, I should add. It seems to me that the substantive matter of whether deputy speakers ought to be accorded the same rights as the speaker is in no doubt. And with that understanding, I'm struggling to understand why we want to differentiate between what comes to the office of the speaker as enjoyed by the substantive speaker, as we know, Bagby, versus the ones that his deputies. I have a little of a challenge, and that's why I like to say that I think the Supreme Court ruling needs a lot more explanation, and on that purpose and on that grounds, I think there must be some sort of review. I'm worried because the nature of the parliament we have now would mean that we are just going to go in endless cycles about, this, should I call it the ding-dong affair. Had it not had a hung parliament, I'm certain that this ruling would be totally different. Having said that, it's a bit difficult for me to understand when we want to stretch the issues about voting to mean or to suggest that willy-nilly, even if a deputy speaker is presiding over a matter, we assume that he is likely to vote in favor of a particular position because he belongs to a particular political party. All my readings are to the extent that every step of the way, the decision must have been made with some sort of political, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. The same exigencies that I'm sure the judges relied upon to make this case can also be explained away by the politics of the time. And that is where my worry really is. I think for the purpose of solving this matter, maybe Parliament should decide that, look, when the substantive speaker is not around, some outside persons may be consulted. Right, this will continue.
All right, thank you very much, Franklin Cudjoe. Thank you very much, the Honourable Nelson Roxon Daffy, I'm a member of Parliament for South Dai, also Honourable Hassan Tampoli. We are out of time. Member of Parliament for Kushegu, Martin Kwegu, and Franklin Cudjoe. Have a good weekend.
Arrange the funeral.